All right, this is for Bomb because we were talking about the feminist movement, and I was talking about the fire that happened in New York, in the garment district, and she was saying that it had nothing to do with the feminist movement. The National Women's Trade Union League of America is all tied into the feminist movement. There's hold on. Well, they do look like heirlooms. These are amazing. This wasn't the only coalition or work with different unions for women. Okay, so New York Shirtwaist Strike of 1909. The New York Shirtwaist Strike of 1909, also the uprising of the 20,000 of labor strike, primarily involved Jewish women working in New York. Hold on one second. I have to turn Martha off. Shirtwaist Factory. It was the largest strike by female American workers up to date, led by Clara Lemlich and the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, and supported the National Women's Trade Union League of America, NWTUL. The strike began in November 1909. It's not dissimilar to the suffragettes movement as well. Parties: the International Ladies Garment Worker Union, Women's Trade Union League, and there was 5 deaths, injured 104, 10% charged, and fined 4.5. In February of 1910, the NWTUL settled with the factory owners gaining improved wages, working conditions, and hours. The end of the strike was followed only a year later by the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, which exposed the plight of immigrant workers working in dangerous and difficult conditions. Background: during the 20th century, American textile workers of all categories, and female textile workers in particular, were subject to the abysmal working conditions marked by crowded, unsanitary facilities, long work days, and miserable wages. Production of the garment-making capital of New York City during the first decade of the century was split between 600 shops and factory employees, 30,000 workers, and producing an estimate of $50 million worth of merchandise annually. Women were frequently trapped by internal subcontracting systems, which made extensive use of homework and additionally limited entry into skilled operator positions by regulating many of the ranks of learners. A category of convenience, which had little correlation to actual level of skill or experience. These so-called learners often earned no more than $3 to $4 a day, a small fraction of the typical wage of $7 to $12 made by semi-skilled operators, who were generally male. At the top of the garment industry hierarchy were the skilled pattern makers and cutters, who were almost exclusively male. Garment industry workers often worked in small sweatshops, and that's what I told her. Work weeks of 65 hours were normal. And in season, they might expand to as many as 75 hours a week. Despite their meager wage, workers were often required to supply their own basic materials, including needles, thread, and sewing machines. Workers could be fined for being late for work or for damaging a garment they were working on. In some work sites, such as the Triangle Shirtwaist Company. Let me put it over here. Let me see if I can do this. Then we can keep my hands free. Whoops. Let me see. Steel doors were used to lock in workers so as to prevent workers from taking breaks. What did I say? And as a result, women had to ask permission from supervisors to use the restroom. These women would go hours and hours and hours without being able to go to the bathroom, which is what I told Mom. But somehow I was not telling the truth. Okay? The industry was dominated by immigrant workers, including prominent Yiddish-speaking Jews, about half of the total, and Italians who comprised another 1/3. About 70% of the workforce was female. And about half of whom were under the age of 20. In the production of the shirtwaist blouses in particular, the workforce was nearly all Jewish women. Some of them had belonged to labor unions in Europe before immigration. Many of the Jewish women in particular had been members of the Bund. Thus, they were no strangers to organized labor and to its tactics. Indeed, Jewish women who worked in the garment industry were among the most vocal and active supporters of women's suffrage. So the suffragettes were feminists. So this is the same correlation. Am I telling a lie yet? No. In September 1909, employees in this Triangle Shirtwaist factory went on strike, and on November 22nd, 1909, a meeting was held at the Great Hall of Cooper Union, where a local 25 voted for a general strike. The meeting had been organized by International Ladies Garment Workers Union and was chaired by socialist Benjamin, I don't know how to say his name, Feigenbaum. This is the photo. In attendance at the meeting was Clara Lemlich, a 23-year-old garment worker. Originally from Ukraine, Lemlich was already on strike as she had been hospitalized after hired thugs assaulted her on the picket line. At the meeting, Lemlich had been listening to men speak about the disadvantages and cautions about the shirtwaist workers going on a general strike. After listening to these men speak for about 4 or more hours, she rose and declared in Yiddish that she wanted to say a few words of her own. After rising to the podium, she declared that the shirtwaist workers would go on a general strike, and she said, "I had no further patience for talk. I move we go on a general strike," and she declared her declaration received a standing ovation, and the audience were wild. Clara then took an oath, swearing that if she became a traitor to the cause she now voted for, then that the hand she now held high wither from her arm. On the 24th of November, less than 1 day after the strike had been declared, 15,000 shirtwaist workers walked out of the factory, with more joining the strike the following day. The number swelled to 20,000, from 20,000 to 30,000 strikers, and the strike became known as the uprising of the 20,000. Most of the strikers were young women between the age of 16 and 25 years old. 75% to 80% were Eastern European Jewish immigrants, and 6 to 9% were Italian immigrants. Strikes, protests against long work hours and low wages. They demanded a 20% pay raise, a 52-hour work week, additionally payment for overtime hours, and improved safety conditions. The factory owner Max Blanc and Isaac Harris were vehemently anti-union and did not accept the demands. Instead, they hired thugs and prostitutes to assault the strikers. Meanwhile, the thugs bribed police officers so that strikers would be arrested for minor infringements. The strikers gained sympathy from many upper-class women of New York society, also known as the Mink Brigade. Many of these women belonged to the Colony Club, an exclusive club that did not admit Jews, which made the alliance unexpected. Members of the Mink Brigade, including Annie Tracy Morgan, the daughter of J.P. Morgan, and Alva Belmont, the former wife of William Kissman Vanderbilt. In 1908, Morgan had begun organizing a women's auxiliary group for the National Civil Federation, which aimed to improve the working conditions for women. By 1909, when the shirtwaist strike had broken out, the Mink Brigade was able to connect with the strikers through the Women's Trade Union League, WTUL, aimed to unite working class women with middle class women who were known as allies. The union put members of the Mink Brigade into the picket line alongside the striking workers. When the upper class women were arrested alongside the striking women, the arrests made front page news, which did not occur when the strike only included working class women. Belmont rented New York's Hippodrome for a rally in support of the workers, and wealthy women donated in support of the cause. However, some activists and newspapers, such as the Call of a social newspaper, criticized the hypocrisy and prejudice of the wealthy women who supported the strike. The strike lasted until February 10th February 1910, and ended in a protocol of peace, which allowed the strikers to go back to work. Many of the demands of the workers had been met, including better pay, shorter hours, and equal treatment of workers who were in the union and workers who were not. However, Blanche and Harris refused to make an agreement with the union, and they did not address key safety concerns such as, let's get here, locked doors and condemned fire escapes for the workplace. So they used to chain the doors. So the locking of the doors was more than that. They actually had chains. So that's for Bomb Cherry and people in her chat.